Hey y'all, welcome back to the fourth Team Logo Fit Roundtable. Right now, it's fun to keep count, but I just got scared that I said the wrong number, and I know moving forward, we're probably going to say the wrong numbers. So it'll probably just be the Team Logo Fit Roundtable. But this is the fourth one. We're super excited. Everybody is back. It is myself, owner and head coach of Team Logo Fit, Jillian, Lauren, Karina, all coaches at Team Logo Fit as well. And Ryan is the training director, his favorite title. And he's like, you just made that up. I'm like, every title's made up because it's our own business, so whatever.
I'm still waiting for my parking spot.
Yeah, I know. I'm just gonna paint like a little X marks a spot. Park you right here, babe. All right, so we're gonna dive right into it. And the first question that we're gonna tackle today is tactics for a successful off season. And actually, we're gonna break this into two parts. So today we're gonna cover the first part, and then next week we're going to cover the second part, because I think there are two very distinct phases of the off season. So after you've been dieting for a substantial amount of time, whether it's for competition or not, you are most likely going to have to get semi-low calorie or just a deficit in general with either cardio and or diet. So the first 4 to 8 weeks look a lot different for most people than afterwards. So in our experience, we've seen that most people typically take about 4 to 8 weeks to semi-normalize. And then after that, kind of, okay, food is a little bit higher, hunger cues are more normal, training is better, sleep is less impaired. And the amount of time varies for everybody. So I'm not just saying that if you don't feel like that after 4 to 8 weeks, you're doing it wrong. No. But in general, that's kind of like the bulk of like, whoa, what's going on? So a lot of people have now started calling this the recovery diet. And this is more geared towards competitors. But basically, you can look at the term reverse diet however you like. Essentially, it's bringing up calories and lowering cardio and increasing your metabolic capacity is kind of the idea behind it. But how you implement it can be very different. So when somebody is coming off of a diet and they are in a very low place, there's absolutely no reason to have, oh, just add 5 grams of carbs here. Oh, maybe 2 grams of fat this week. Drop 15 minutes of cardio. No, that is not appropriate. And what the point of the recovery diet, which has been coined by Team 3DMJ, is to really get people back to a maintenance place faster in the first month. They use the first month, and they have a ton of content on this, so you guys can go check that out. They're an amazing team. Highly recommend their information. But basically, in this first 4 to 8 weeks, what we like to do with clients is have an initial bump in calories that's pretty substantial, not something that you would normally do in your regular reverse diet. Like if somebody comes to you and they're kind of a little bit low, but not super low, you're just going to make small changes incrementally up. Somebody's been dieting and is pretty aggressive, you're going to go from the low place still to a higher amount and definitely reduce the cardio. So that's kind of setting the stage for those first 4 to 8 weeks. And what, I want you guys to chime in kind of with your experience, how we navigate that process.
Yeah, so I actually just had a client come off stage about 2 weeks ago. So we're moving into week 2 of her reverse diet. And as you can imagine, you've been dieting for so long, and after you come on stage, that rein is off of having that show date. So essentially, it's just as hard, or if not harder, as a lot of people will say, to try to stay within that macronutrient range, even the recovery diet, especially because hyperphagia is so high right after that diet. So a tactic that I like to implement, at least mentally, for my client to remember, like, yes, you have these higher targets and we are dropping cardio. However, the discipline going into these next 4 to 8 weeks has to be similar to what we've been doing for the last few months. We can't just go from being extremely structured and regimented to just, having whatever we want. We still need to plan because, again, like, cravings are going to be through the roof, hunger is going to be through the roof. And yes, you do have so much more room, but slip-ups, we're in perfect environment for slip-ups at this point. So I definitely like to suggest that you still plan out at least, 2 to 3 meals a day, and then allow for some flexibility until we're in a bit more stable place mentally and physically, to kind of wing it a bit more.
I was going to say too that the discipline going into the reverse is also great because it can mitigate unwanted body fat gain right off the bat. What I will say, however, sorry, I don't know what. This headphone is just not having it today. What I will say is that when you do that, sometimes your body can respond in a way that you're not expecting. So from my personal experience, last show I did last year, we started adding calories. I was super regimented about hitting them, that my weight was like barely going up, which is great because mentally as a competitor, you're like, oh, look, like I can hold this physique. And you kind of can start to convince yourself that you can stay there. And you can't, and you should not expect to stay there. So while the discipline is 100% encouraged so that we don't have unwanted body fat gain, you need to remember that you are not in a diet phase and that it is okay to see your scale move a little bit. And we want to see, you know, like a pound a week, a half pound a week, whatever the case may be, nice and steadily, depending on how aggressive you had to get there. But it needs to, the mindset that needs to be shifted as well coming out of the show is just as important as the discipline required on the nutrition, because it can be pretty challenging. And I don't know if you guys have been there, but I've definitely been that person that was like, everyone says they can't maintain this physique, but I'm going to do it. And you think that you can for some reason. And maybe you kind of do for 2 or 3 weeks after the show if you're really good about your food and your reverse, because we have seen kind of like a hyper responding effect with some people that get refeeds and add back more food. So that's not uncommon, but it's not the goal. We do want to add back body fat at a reasonable and appropriate pace, because you cannot live there.
Yeah, and like that period of time immediately post-show, your body is basically primed to just store as much as it can. So really keeping things in check, that, you know, first 4 to 8 weeks post-show, it's really going to set you up for a really great off season. And again, with that, to kind of piggyback off what you said with the mental transition into that off season, I think that's just as important as just hitting your targets, because if you're mentally in a state where you're expecting to stay lean and expecting to keep those lines and all the stuff that you were experiencing during prep, it's going to be a much harder experience for you to raise food and really enter the off season with the right mentality when you're still kind of thinking about the lines and being shredded. So really changing that mentality to, oh, I'm feeling much better. I have more energy. I want to increase my strength, focus on training. That's going to help you really enter this phase and adhere to it.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, what a gentlemanly lady. So I'm going to make like a little analogy here because I've never been on stage, obviously.
What?
What I have done is lifted really heavy weights in front of people. Well, relatively heavy. Your physique on stage is a snapshot. It's a peak. It's a peak condition. Peak conditions are that of a pyramid. The peak is up here. It takes a tremendous foundation to get there, and you're never going to stay there longer than, well, in the case of powerlifting, a day, and the case of bodybuilding, a day, maybe 2. So you're trying to mimic unattainable long-term achievement for your body where you're at right now. So basically in a trainable state, as long as I can maintain 90 to 95% of my all-time 1 rep max numbers, I'm now in a trainable state year-round where I can get into a training routine and train for 12 to 16 weeks and be able to go compete. So it applies the same way in bodybuilding and physique. As long as you maintain, it's not going to be 90 or 95%, like some kind of irrelevant number like that. But as long as you can maintain some kind of a physique to where your body fat is in manageable levels and you're training good and your nutrition's on point, you can now get ready and you're in a trainable state to get back into that peak condition. But you can't stay at a peak forever. It's impossible.
No, and I think until people have actually been through a peak week, and a proper peak week, I should add that, not a bad peak week, you will see how dramatically your body will respond in a great way. Like if you peak right and you nail it, you will have 0 inflammation, you'll be holding 0 water, you will be as lean as possible, and you will be as full as possible. those things do not go together and cannot be maintained for more than 2-3 days at max. Like, let's just say you're trying to do a photo shoot or something afterwards. Your body just literally cannot do that, because there's going to be something, you're going to flatten out, you're going to spill over, you're going to add some adipose tissue. There's so many things that can happen. But everybody knows when they've gotten to that point what they feel like. So you're like, well, I had popping muscles and I was super lean and there was a vein, and that's literally never going to happen unless you're peaking perfectly all the time, or you're just some total freak. So to kind of wrap this part up, the first 4 to 8 weeks will look very, very, very different for everybody. And also there are people who just genetically are going to respond a lot better to adding calories, where maybe they don't necessarily add a lot of body fat right away. And then there's other people who literally you add 100 grams of carbs, take away some cardio, and they're already adding weight. And that's just genetics, right? Like, some people sit heavier at a higher body fat than others, and we have to manage that as coaches. So there's no absolute one way to do this, but just be aware that the first initial weeks are going to be very challenging mentally. You need to be in a place where you're saying, okay, I'm transitioning from prep to off season, but you still need to manage your behaviors that you had going into it. Because if you just totally let the reins off, like Karina said, it is absolutely going to be destruction. I promise you, because I've done 20-something shows, and it is a bitch every time. What were you going to say, Jill, before I go to that?
Yeah. I just want to add, if you've ever been stage lean or, close to stage lean, you'd know how kind of uncomfortable it is to stay there, how hard it is to kind of keep your food that low. And, just feeling that tiny, it's not necessarily the most comfortable place to be at. So why would you want to prolong that once you're done with the show? Exactly. So again, with the post-show mentality, it's not a bad thing to, immediately maybe hold some water post-show, or, see those lines fade in the week after, because that's a peak condition, like Ryan said, and it's not something that's made to last more than that.
Yeah. Everybody will respond far different to a peak coming after the show, whatever. There's so many variations to it and nuances, but just know that those first 4 to 8 weeks, there has to be tactics in there as a coach and a client, and you guys really have to be open and talking about that. So moving on to the next part, this is about training burnout. So we've heard this a lot with people, I'm just really burned out. And this either means that there is a ton of life stress going on. That could mean that there's a ton of training stress, as in they're having too much training that's not being managed appropriately. They could be having a lot of diet stress, and they could be having a lot of emotional stress as well. So that will lead them into not liking what they're doing, and just kind of feeling like shit in the gym and not really having good workouts. And really that affects all areas of their life, of course. So typically what happens with burnout is, with training at least, it can be really, really mitigated, like I just mentioned, with lifestyle interventions, diet interventions, but more importantly, deloads with training. And we get fought on this a lot, I would say, with people, not everybody, but a lot. Karina. Literally, I gotta tell this bitch, I'm like, you gotta take a deload this week. She's like, I don't do it. And then she's like, I feel so much better. You're right. And so there's gonna be some people that you really have to, like, hey, we gotta do this. It's for your best interest. I'm not just trying to tell you to be lazy. There's plenty of other things that we can do that week. And then there's some people who you're gonna have to push a little bit harder. They're like, can I take a deload? It's been like 2 weeks. You're like, I think we can still push a little bit. So, but for the people who are maybe fighting, anybody listening, fighting for the deload or not, like, we are here to say that if you want to make progress and not hit this kind of burnout phase, that's going to be really, really important. So I know you guys have a lot to add to this from personal experience as well as a coaching experience.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to,
okay.
I'll go. I kind of wanted to bring this topic up just because it was kind of a trend that I was seeing in check-ins. Like I said, not from my training clients, but from the other nutrition clients. And I wanted people to know that it is okay to feel like you're burnt out, or that, and most of the time it's worded as like, I'm not motivated in the gym. And I think that you start to feel like you're just going through the motions, like you're going in and you're walking over the machine, or kind of just like getting it done half-ass. So that kind of feeling. And I just want people to know that happens and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you, but there are things that we can do. So if it's somebody that I am not prescribing training for, because in my training, I typically have the deload programmed in so that people don't have a freaking choice. But if it's somebody that I'm not programming training for, I usually try to get an idea of what their typical routine looks like, first of all. And if it's not too high volume, I might just say, like, let's switch out one of those longer hypertrophy workouts for a shorter metabolic workout, just to give them something different to kind of look forward to. So this can look a bunch of different ways. You can do something like that. You can literally say, take an extra rest day. So if you're working out 5 times a week, maybe go down to 3 or 4 that week for your deload. Maybe take some sets off, some reps off. This can look very different, but something that I also like to prescribe to clients when we're working with a deload situation is to also implement an act of self-care that week. So whether that be like a massage or whatever they want to do for themselves that week, just to make them feel a little more refreshed and come back stronger the next week. Because I know that mentally it can be challenging, especially the type A person. I get you, girls, guys. You are go, go, go. And it's almost like you feel guilty if you're not in the gym X amount of times a week. And that is just not how you should, well, I can't tell you how you should feel, but that is not the case. You will be fine. Everything will remain intact when you come
Lauren
back.
is clearly all about dictatorship, if you guys haven't noticed. She's like, there's
let
no
me
choice.
Let me tell you.
I'm going to tell you how you're going to feel.
You're going to do deload and you're going to fucking like it.
Yeah.
Apply for training through the link in my bio.
Great selling
But
point.
yes, I'm going to go ahead and pass this off.
He's here all week.
No, that was a good thing. I think you can continue.
Yeah. With training clients, I always see the typical, response where they don't want to deload, but I always see when we're approaching the need for a deload. And I typically like to run a program with them to see where their sweet spot is, whether, 4 weeks they're good or 6 weeks is the most common where I see clients need a deload. So normally I like to run a program with them and kind of see where they're at before I decide, 6 weeks is good for you. But another thing I think a lot about recently is prescribing deloads, or at least making sure their program or their training consistency is where it should be before they need a deload, just because I would run a program with maybe 1 or 2 clients who may not have the best consistency. So maybe 2 or 3 of those weeks weren't really, they didn't hit the frequency or they didn't hit the program like they should have. So that kind of throws a wrench into the deload schedule, I would say, where, they could use a deload, but at the same time, it's a little tricky when consistency isn't there.
Yeah, and at that, you need to look to see are they missing those gym sessions for a reason? Like if there's a good reason that those aren't being hit, is it too much workload for them? Is it life factors, whatever? And you evaluate from there. But just a couple tactical ways to approach a deload. There's tons of literature out there on different models of deloading and how different studies have used it. But I typically will take away a quarter all the way down to half of the volume. So I'm definitely not afraid to cut sets in half across the board on almost everything. And some people might see that at first and they think it's too much. But realistically, it's a week of training, and the entire point of doing it is you're still getting some work in. You're not just sitting on your ass, so you're still having what I would call active recovery, or you're getting blood flow. You're still stimulating the tissue. You're still going through the motions, and you're using the motor patterns that you've built up over the training block. And a couple different things that you can do is actually, Lauren touched on this. If the client is doing, say, a hypertrophy block and she's tossing in some metabolic training, but you always want to look to see what the current block was and how the deload can positively benefit that and maybe fill in some holes of what they were missing during that training block. So if they were doing a really heavy training block, you can completely eliminate the heavy training and just do some isolation work. So it might be more isolation work than what they were doing previously, but it's still not enough to make them really sore and die, but they're getting good blood flow. They're going through movement patterns that aren't going to really stress joints and just kill their nervous system. And vice versa. Same thing with if they're doing a bunch of hypertrophy work, maybe I just do a bunch of unilateral work with them, or do stability work and things that motor patterns that they just haven't been doing. So there's a couple different ways that you can skin the cat. You just be creative with it and make sure you're doing less work than what you're doing. You were doing, And those deloads can be 1 to 2 weeks. And you could even do just completely active recovery, going outside, playing sports, going for a hike, or if you need to get out of the gym, get your mind right, you're like so burnt out that you don't even want to look at a weight, then go do something else. So
Yeah, I personally, kind of going off of what Jillian said, is when I do prescribe deloads, I don't personally, I update all my clients' training week to week. I don't really pre-prescribe a deload because I kind of go off of how they are doing week to week. But the advantage of weekly check-ins with the coaches, I can also see like what are their life stressors, where are they in their, because most of my clients are females, in their menstrual cycle, and how that can affect their training. But deloads definitely are very effective, and I just kind of look for those cues from the client themselves, for mental and physical burnout. And sometimes it's just like just needing variety in their training, like throwing in some metcons, or just maybe not lifting this week and just working on something very specific outside of the gym. However, yeah, I think we all touched on really good ways to avoid burnout, both mentally and physically.
And then just really quick, because I have been sending this to a couple of my clients, if anyone out there is not subscribed to the newsletter, Karina does the Metcon Monday. Every Sunday night you get it. And so that's something that I have been advocating for people to do that I don't have as training client, but that are feeling a little unmotivated or burnt out, or they want to switch it up a little bit. Those are pre-programmed Metcons for you that you don't have to come up with yourself. So definitely take advantage of those. And even if you just swap out one of your current workouts for one of those, I think that's a great option.
But don't do this week's because it's really hard. I've already looked it over. I was like, oh shit, this is gonna be awful.
But like skip this Mondays.
Quit not do this week.
It is that'll be a doozy. Also for the body blueprint, so everybody has their custom training clients, but we also do offer a program that is written by Ryan that is very progressive and kind of covers all bases as far as like strength and hypertrophy. However, we weren't really sure how we were going to add in deloads, but now we are going to have that. It's going to basically be every 2 blocks, and then every 9th week there will be a deload. But even if you are feeling maybe like beforehand or afterwards a little bit iffy with that, you will have that week that you can implement kind of on your own. So the body blueprint is basically a great progressive training system that's high quality, low price, because it is not coaching based. It's not like one-on-one coaching, but you will be getting something like that as well. So anybody who is interested in subscribing to the body blueprint, which is the monthly training program, there will be deloads in there as well, and you can kind of auto-regulate that yourself if you'd like, but there will be that option. And lastly, we're going to round this out with post-workout nutrition. So there's a lot of, controversy, I guess, if you're really going to call post-workout drink controversial. But in the world of exercise science, it kind of is, because there are some people who, swear by this magical window that you need to eat. And then there's some people who say that that is the dumbest thing that you could possibly think of. As usual, the answer is somewhere in the middle, and it's very contextual. So in general, post-workout nutrition is going to be describing the meal or the drink, the calories that you have after your training. So I would say that pretty much everybody here is on board with what we all recommend, which is having a high quality protein powder after you train. Again, is this absolutely necessary? No, but it is an ideal time to have protein. There's a few reasons that we'll dive into, but basically when you're training, you're breaking down muscle tissue, and the whole goal of training is growth. So if you're going to grow, you need the adequate protein and carbs, typically after you train. Now, some people will say, well, why don't you just have a whole meal after you train? Well, some people don't want to eat a whole meal after they work out. And then also, this is going to be a lot faster digesting. So the hydrolyzed isolate is going to be very fast digesting for you. And then if you add in a fast digesting carb, that's also going to be quickly in and out of your system. So you're going to hit that kind of MPS, muscle protein synthesis spike. It's going to come back down, and then you're going to be able to eat a whole meal at a later period of time. But now you're basically fueling recovery in a more efficient manner. If you can't do that, are all your gains lost? Absolutely not. But is it going to be something that if you already have everything set up to where you have several meals a day, high quality protein spaced out, if you add in this protein shake, it's going to be at an advantageous time?
Yeah, so just, I mean, you nailed it with all of that right there. But I think most people at least have heard the term the anabolic window. You do not need to be like crushing chicken the second your last dumbbell hits the ground. Like you're going to be good. And what?
I've been doing it wrong this whole
like,
time.
research has shown that the anabolic window is going to probably be a little shorter for a more trained individual than a newbie in the gym. But still with that, you're looking at like a 16-hour window plus up to 72 if you're completely untrained. So like you are fine. You don't need to start crushing protein the second that you're done with your workout. But like Lauren said, this will be very dependent on the person. Some people do not like to sit down and have a meal 30 minutes, even to an hour after they work out. So the shake is awesome just to kind of get something in your stomach and help the recovery process and the repair process quickly. And again, rapid assimilation for that. So the first form, Formula 1, will be great as opposed to the level 1 in that case. That's what we all use. And then obviously at some point later, I would love to see a whole food meal with your complex carb, your protein, and then a little lighter on the fat at that meal. But that will be totally different for everybody. Sometimes I don't even like to have the shake immediately after, so I'll wait. But you kind of have to just mess with what's going to be best for you. And I think it depends on the time of your workout. If you're working out right before dinner, if you're working out really early in the morning, things like that. So there's not really a right way to do it. It just needs to be what's best for you. And then that's kind of our general guideline for gold standard would be to get a good isolate in pretty close to the end of the workout.
And then you guys definitely hit the nail on the head. I don't have much to add except for the only time where I feel like it is most important to get, or I guess for the specific person, it is most important to get that protein, that post-workout protein shake in is if you're training fasted. That's when I think that would be like the most important. It's most important for that person to get that shake in right away. However, it depends on the individual. And then I also wanted to kind of share from a personal standpoint, I prefer having my shake right after I train just to hold me over, because especially when you're dieting, my time on my way home from the gym, I am like either ravenous, and if I don't have anything holding me over, I will just go straight to the pantry, not making any good decisions. Whereas if I'm, satiated for at least 30 minutes to an hour, I can make the better decision of having a good post-workout meal like an hour or so later.
Yeah, we both are on that same boat. And there's some people who are either not hungry after they train or they're ravenous. And we're both in that like ravenous category. So I know that for me, like that is a very like sticky situation where like if you get back and you're fatigued from training and you haven't had, your post-workout shake, you haven't had anything, you're like, I'm ready to fuck up this pantry of,
yeah.
I don't even care what it is. Like, you're just like a bottomless pit at that point. So it does kind of, and also too, when you're dieting, you are very fatigued. I find that it does help kind of like give you a little boost back up. Obviously there's, calories in there. And Formula 1 is delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Thin Mint cookie. Mm.
Yeah. So yeah, we can't say Thin Mint, but it's chocolate mint cookie.
Oh.
But it's
like a Thin Mint, my bad.
It's like a Thin Mint.
It's like a Thin Mint.
I always think of that as the name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like there's a protein powder that tastes just like Lucky Charms, but they have to call it Magical Charms because obviously you can't
That's my favorite.
Like Lucky Charms is clearly branded. So chocolate mint cookie is 100% Thin Mint, and then Magical Charms is 100% like the milk at the bottom of the. And my favorite like sleeper flavor is lemon meringue. And I'm not a big lemon person, but it's very like has a really good, I don't know, flavor to it. Ryan's shaking his head, but
so with the context, I'm not going to add anything significant or intelligent to this conversation, but when your meal timing is, trying to eat every 3 to 4 hours, if you're trying to get as many MPS spikes via food as possible, if you train for 2 to 3 hours, you're due. So if you're not ready to eat and you don't want to eat or you have to drive to and from the gym, a lot of people kind of forget about time and time lapses. Like the time spent at the gym and the time spent in the car didn't count or something. Like if you eat even directly before you leave for a 30-minute gym ride and then train for a couple hours, and then drive back home. It'd be up to like 4 or 5 hours before you've eaten anything, which is fine, depending on your total calorie intake. But if you're trying to gain weight and you're eating at a surplus or eating at an amount of food that like you're not normally comfortable with, I would definitely recommend getting the shake in as soon as possible. And then you can always put some electrolytes in the shake also, and that'll help just not feel like dog shit after training. So those are just fun, applicable points.
Yeah, I feel like you guys pretty much hit it.
Did we hit the nail on the head?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, but then I was like, wait, no. Anyway,
Don't be like them.
I like pull a nail out of my. I'm like, you guys talking about this nail?
Lauren, you like actually would though is the thing.
I would just have a yeah. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Like that Patrick meme where he's like,
yes.
But basically, like, if you have a lot of protein to hit in the day, this is also a really good thing to do, just because I know with my clients and just people I talk to, on campus, some people have 200 plus grams of protein to hit, or just a really high number where they're short maybe like 50 or so grams at the end of the day. So having a shake or 2 scoops of protein, that's an easy 50 grams of protein for you right there. So that's going to just be a much easier route to take rather than, eating a bunch of chicken at the end of the night,
Yeah.
Immediately post-workout.
I also wanted to say, just for a pro tip, people out there, make your shake, add some stevia and cinnamon, and pour it into your iced coffee, and thank me later.
Ooh,
it tastes so fucking good.
do not give Jillian any more iced coffee tips.
Oh,
Listen.
I've already sent her this. I've already sent
Yeah, she has. Actually,
listen.
When I go visit Lauren, we're just going to live off of that. So I probably won't return.
I would not be surprised, to be super honest. You guys are like, I dropped 16 pounds this week. I don't know what happened. We drank coffee for 6 days. Yeah.
They all come back with the regular heart rhythms. They're like, arrhythmia.
Oh my God, what's
Right.
going on with me?
I feel so hungover. Why? I have such bad migraines.
Your body's like, vegetables!
Totally.
Nobody's body ever said that.
Yeah.
No.
One thing to wrap it up too. So a lot of people are fairly anti-protein powders. Again, there's always like 2 things to this, right? And so here I'll just set this little record straight for once and for all. If you have a high quality protein powder, there is absolutely no reason that it is inferior to other proteins. Actually, if we're really going to get specific, a hydrolyzed whey isolate, or even a high quality, just like blended whey isolate and concentrate, is going to have more of the building blocks of protein per smaller amount, like per gram, than any other protein source, right? Now, the issue that people run into is not having a high quality protein powder. So they're like, oh, I have an upset stomach from it. Oh, there's all this extra shit in it. So that's where it comes down to, where is your protein from? How is it being manufactured? So First Form manufactures all of their own protein themselves. They use like the same farm, all the same practices, and they do what's known as low temperature processing. So all protein powders, so protein powder education for guys, all comes out same raw ingredients to start. And then there's either 2 ways to do it: a high temperature processing or a low temperature processing. And the processing is not the bad part, because everything gets processed. It's the temperature. So when you put it at a high temperature, you have to use more chemicals and agents to basically make it go through faster. And it's a cheaper end product, but it's a less bioavailable product. Whereas if you do a low temperature process, you strip less of the actual protein. It's slower and more expensive, but now things are more intact. So visually, First Form always uses this representation of, okay, you put a chicken breast on the, we're just really on chicken breast today, chicken breast on the grill, like at 1,000 degrees, and you just like char it really fast, but you're like, is your body really going to use that? And how is that kind of like what's going on there? Or you slow cook the chicken in a crock pot, and you're like, okay. So again, that's not trying to like make an analogy for like what is actually happening at the protein plant. That is just like a visual representation for you guys to kind of tie that in. So that is why we stand behind First Form protein powder and all recommend it. Been using it for 2 years now and have had 0 issues with it. And many people who switch to that protein are like, oh, I can actually drink this and I don't feel like shit like I did with my other protein powders. So,
oh, she got specific.
I know. Sorry, I hate to do that with like the whole protein powder thing, but I feel like it just needs to be cleared up as to what the issue is, like why people might be having issues with, because most people do not have issues with dairy, especially if it's a hydrolyzed white isolate. There's barely any dairy in it. So don't tell me that it's a dairy problem. It's usually a low quality protein powder that you're having a problem with.
That's always the first question I have when someone tells me that, oh, you know, my stomach feels like gurgly or gross after I drink protein powder. I'm like, where are you getting it from? And
Costco. No.
That's your problem.
Costco will have the same protein powder, and it'll have like 13 different nutrition labels for the same protein powder. Like one has 7 grams of carbs, one has 13.
Yeah, because they use the scraps from everybody else, and then they just put it together. And yeah, if you ever notice that all the labels are different. Same goes for the fish oil. It's just a whole different thing. Protein powder.
Skip all that protein powder and eat hot dogs. Duh.
Yeah, I mean,
Duh.
I don't know what you guys are doing with your life, but yeah, protein powder is one of those.
I'm on that hot dog protein bar diet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you guys are grossing me out today, not gonna lie. But yeah, 2 things that are very price dependent: protein powder and fish oil. 100%, the more expensive ones are going to be the higher quality ones. So just know that. But yeah, so to wrap all of this up, this was a really great talk. Like I said, next time we're going to do part 2 of the tactics for a successful off season, but like after that first initial chunk of time, when you're more stabilized and less crazy. And we'll be back next week with that. If you guys are interested in more information, like getting suicide metcons from Karina, and also just as more dictatorship from Lauren.
Let's go.
Yeah, right. Or, you know, you get some hot dog recipes from Jillian. I don't know, whatever. Just go over DMs with that.
I don't think I'm happy about that.
I know. I'm kidding. You're like, do I need to write that?
I was like, can we cut that out?
God.
You guys, Jillian does not eat hot dogs like all the time.
I swear, I would rather have like protein bars all
my
day.
physique is hot dogs.
Is that what the keto life is like?
You really do really.
Yes, but also wrapped in bacon.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Got it. And bulletproof coffee. Maybe you'll do that. You guys like
I
coffee?
can do the coffee part.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But for all information from all of the coaches and just more educational stuff, you guys, and not hot dogs, you can subscribe to our newsletter, teamlocofit.com, and you go to the top and just hit subscribe. So you'll get that twice a week. We also put out just, you know, great information on there. Everybody's own Instagram pages. You know, we put up stuff as far as educational content. We would love if you guys subscribed here, left us a comment, left us a review, let us know how you like this podcast/video. You can find us on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. And the next Body Blueprint enrollment will be opening soon, so stay tuned for that. We will announce it on all social media platforms, and we would love for you to join that if you'd like a quality training program. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty badass. And for more information, you can't subscribe right now to it, but you can go to our website and it's under programs and just click the Body Blueprint tab. And that's all I got for you guys. I'm gonna stop rambling, and everybody have a great day.